um, you get a major change in the United States during the Gilded Age. We need these immigrant laborers, but we're not taking care of them. Okay. And the last thing we mentioned the other day was the Spanish American War, where America goes to war with Spain, and we go to war under some false pretenses. What happens that ignites the war? Toby. Yes, the USS Maine. It's a ship, and it mysteriously blows up. And America's like, the Spanish had to have done it. All right, they jump to the conclusion that Spain has done it. They defeat Spain pretty quickly, and they take land from them. America starts branching out and creating an empire. Now, on the surface, we look good because we not only win that war, but we get land. But is it really for the right reason? And the answer is probably not. That you go to war with somebody for all the wrong reasons. Okay. Now, one other thing we want to mention about America is a couple of things actually. One of them is the annexation of Hawaii. Okay. Fun fact: out here in the middle of the Pacific, here's continental over here. On the right, you see the continental United States. Here's San Francisco. Here are the Hawaiian Islands. This is Guam, the Philippines, and over here's Japan, and then mainland Asia. Okay. And Hawaii is this randomly populated island group out here in the Pacific, right? A lot of people don't know that, they forget that there are people on the Hawaiian Islands. There are natives there. And how they got there is still kind of a mystery. Fun fact, the British actually just showed up there in the 1700s, were exploring, and they're like, oh my gosh, there's people on this island, all right? The Hawaiians had their own culture. They had a queen. They had their own system of doing things. And the Americans know they're out here, and America wants this land, okay? There's three main reasons that America wants Hawaii, okay? Can you think of why? Toby, what's one of them? All right, it's a strategic point, okay? First reason we want Hawaii, it has strategic value. Toby, what do we put there later on that is of importance to us? Pearl Harbor Naval Base. There's a naval base there. That way we've got the U.S. Navy here. And who are we worried about keeping our eye on? Not Russia, but Japan. Okay. And so we're like, hey, we've got a base here in Honolulu, Hawaii. We have a base here in Guam, and we have a base here in the Philippines. And we're like, hey, Japan, we see you up and coming, and we just want to let you know the Pacific area, that's our turf. Okay. And the Hawaiian base is a good strategic point, right? It's also a good place to place your Navy and as a refueling point. So it has strategic value, but that's not the only reason that we want Hawaii. Why does anybody exploit or colonize? Not you. Why do people exploit other lands? What do they want, Ramiro? Resources. What resources do we want from Hawaii? What does Hawaii have that you can't really get in a lot of other places? It's easier than what you might imagine. Toby, go ahead. Pineapples. One of the things we want, pineapples. When America takes over, when America literally goes in and gets rid of their queen and says, hey, we're taking over now, there's a businessman by the name of Sam Dole who starts taking the apples and sending them back to the mainland. Dole Fruit Company. Yeah. That's where they got their big start in terms of pineapples. And they're the big importer of pineapples now. And look, this is still a point of contention with the native Hawaiians who live there now. They're like, hey, we've been exploited for over 100 years, and we really don't like it. Okay? Pineapple's not the only thing. Cane sugar. If you don't know, sugar is made from actual sugar cane, like a plant. And they have cane sugar that they get from there, pineapples, all right? And it's a strategic point, so it's got resources, it has strategic value, right? But there's one other reason, all right? And it's not because it's a tourist destination. This is how America sold the idea on it. They said if we don't annex Hawaii and make it part of our country, who will try to take it over? Who is it, Toby? Japan. They're like, if we don't do this and take over Hawaii, the Japanese will try it. And we don't want them in our backyard. Okay? So there's three main reasons that we annex Hawaii. One, strategic value. Two, the resources. And three, Japan was going to do it. And we thought, hey, it's better for us to take over and rule this than the Japanese, because we'll be nice to the Hawaiians. The Japanese won't. Right? Fun fact, there's still a lot of angstiness today between the native Hawaiians and white people who live there. Another fun fact, what do you think the wealth gap is like there? Do you think the native Hawaiians are the ones who make more money or the white people who live there? The white people. Another fun fact, too, one of the things that's interesting, people forget this, the Hawaiians actually have a native language, and they're struggling to find more people who will learn the language. Uh, they're afraid that the Hawaiian culture, the language and everything is dying out, and they want people to learn that because they're like, hey, this is culture that goes back, more than 1,000 years, right? And nobody's even sure how the Hawaiians got there. They're not even sure. They didn't really keep a lot of history back then, so they're like, we've always been here. But an interesting point of contention for us that Hawaii is one of the territories that we annex. Okay, so America is in the process of building our own little empire. All right, that the Spanish American War gave us land. We took Hawaii, and one other thing here too. Okay, Teddy Roosevelt becomes American president in the early 1900s. When William McKinley got assassinated, Roosevelt takes over. He was the vice president. And Roosevelt does a couple of other things. Roosevelt wants to make some changes in America. And one of the big changes, he says, I want America to be internationally known as a powerful country. Okay? And one of the things that he had was a famous motto that he said will describe the United States. You might have heard this before. He said, speak softly and carry a big stick. Okay? And Roosevelt said, this is how we're going to handle our foreign countries. We're going to be nice. We're going to be diplomatic. But if you mess with us, you're going to get hit in the face with a big stick. And what do you think the big stick is supposed to represent? Well, the military, our conflict. Okay? And he says, look, if you don't think that we're capable of doing this, ask Spain about it. We have a modern military and we're not afraid to use it. Okay? Now, Teddy Roosevelt, something else that's important about him too. His motto of speak softly and carry a big stick was important, but something else he did when he was president got on people's nerves a little bit. He sent out the U.S. Navy on a worldwide tour. Okay? He sends a big group of naval ships on a worldwide tour. Not the entire Navy, but a big segment of it. What would be the purpose in sending your ships around the world to show everybody? Not you. Emma, why might he do that? To show them off and to show what? What does he want people to see about America? He's flexing on them. Okay? That's the terminology you all would use. He wants you to see, he says, hey, if we're going to threaten to speak softly and carry a big stick, I want you to see what happens, what you're up against. All right? Now, here's where it gets really funny. Let me go back to this map for a second, too. Okay? Here's here's the West Coast, but the East Coast, they go across the Atlantic and around through Europe, and they make some stops. But on their way back home, take a guess where they make sure to stop right before they come back. Where, Toby? Japan. That's one of their final stops on their tour because they're trying to send a message. They're trying to tell Japan, hey, we're up here, you're down here. Okay? I know you think you're modern with your cool new weapons, and I know you beat Russia in a war, but that doesn't mean nothing to us. Okay? And look, Japan is insulted by this. They feel insulted by America multiple times. Remember, last week I put online for you a letter from Millard Fillmore, the American president, to Emperor Meiji, basically saying it's a low-key threat. All right? And then, on top of that, Teddy Roosevelt was the mediator in the Russo-Japanese War. He helped negotiate the peace agreement, and Japan felt like they got screwed in that. And they're like, we weren't treated like a victor. And then you're sending your Navy around here to visit us like you're something. The Japanese feel insulted again. And look, there's going to be several more insults leading up to 1941 where Japan feels like, you know what? It's time to teach the Americans a lesson. Okay? Japan says, hey, this region here in the Pacific, we want to be considered a powerful nation, the powerful nation. And America says, yeah, we want to be considered the powerful nation in the Pacific too. They're both competing to be the big dog. Over in Europe, remember, it's Great Britain and Germany over there. Well, in the Pacific, America and Japan are competing to be the big dog over there. All right? So there's this rivalry that's coming up between the United States and Japan. All right. One other thing to mention about Teddy Roosevelt. You guys going back to your 10th grade history, do y'all remember hearing something about manifest destiny and the Monroe Doctrine? What was the idea, first of all, of manifest destiny? Go ahead, Ramiro. Yeah, it was like America is meant to be conquering from sea to shining sea, all the way across the continent. And you all remember the Monroe Doctrine too? You heard the term at least? Basically, the Monroe Doctrine is like telling other nations, like, don't try to come over here. We're in charge of this continent. All right. And Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, wanted to echo that sentiment. And so he put out a statement called the Roosevelt Corollary. All right. Anytime a corollary is like an adding to a statement, like let's say that Emma writes a nice letter and I add a corollary, it's like I'm adding something to her statement. Okay. And Teddy Roosevelt's statement is this: he lets European nations know that you can't come over here and colonize the Americas. He says, I know what you guys are up to in Africa, I know what you're up to in Asia, but the Americas are closed off for colonization. All right. And he makes them known. He says, look, if anybody's going to exploit the Central and Southern America, who's going to do it? Us. This is our backyard. This is our turf. Okay? And so Roosevelt's letting them know with a couple things. One, speak softly and carry a big stick. Two, I'm sending the Navy around the world. Three, I'm giving you a statement. Stay out of our side of the globe. All right? You Europeans, you go over there and you do your own thing. You exploit your people over there. Over here, this is our turf. We exploit people. Wow. It's kind of a-hole-ish, but you know. All right. That's Teddy Roosevelt. Okay. Now, America's becoming an empire. And like I said, we're the Gilded Age. That Gilded Age is really important because we look shiny on the outside, but we're kind of jacked up on the inside too. We have some really not pure motives. Okay. Now, we got one more nation we want to talk about. It's a nation with no home, the Jews, which a lot of people think they understand about the Jews. Okay. And sometimes they get some crazy stereotypes going around, right? First of all, the Jews don't have a homeland at this time in the 1800s, but what ancient country do we connect them with? Israel. If you don't know, this is on the map over here in the Mediterranean. Here's ancient Israel here in the Middle East. And the Jews are a racial group of people and a religious group, right? What famous book do we hear a lot about the Jews in? The Bible, especially the Old Testament, okay? And the Jews lived in that area that we called ancient Israel. All right? And the Jews, fun fact about Israel, what did they believe that God had done for them regarding Israel? It was the promised land, that God literally promised this land to them. All right? And you don't necessarily have to believe that, but they believe it beyond a shadow of a doubt. Okay? Now, this map, I chose this map in particular because see this area in red right here, which has like North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe in it? That's the old Roman Empire. Okay, and here's why we mention them. The Romans conquered a huge chunk of area, like a huge part of the known world at that time, and part of it was ancient Israel. All right, and the Jews did something incredibly bold. They tried to stand up to the Romans. Okay, and if you remember your ancient history, what happens to people who try to stand up to Rome? They get squished bad. The Romans, when they conquered people, they would usually let you keep your customs, your local cultures, even your religion, as long as you paid your taxes and you didn't try to revolt. Okay? The Jews made a really bad mistake and they tried to revolt right around the year 70 AD. Okay, give or take a year. All right, so it's literally like 30 years after Jesus was walking the earth. The Jews tried to rise up against the Romans, and they got destroyed. Like literally, almost the entire Jewish population was wiped out. They killed nearly every man, woman, and child. All right. What was left of the Jews, right? They had what was called the diaspora or the diaspora. You can pronounce it either way. And it's where the Jews spread out among the known world. Okay? Whatever Jews were left in Israel, they're like, we got to get out of here because Rome's going to kill us. So they started moving all over the place, and a lot of them settled in Europe. All right? So you get a lot of Jews who are settling in Europe. Now, Jews for all that time, like from 70 AD until the late 1800s, they're just trying to rebuild and repopulate. Okay? And when they go throughout Europe, they're settling in different towns in Europe, particularly Eastern Europe. And the Jews are actually going to not only survive, but they're going to start to prosper. And they build their own little communities. Now, what's interesting about the Jews, though, even today, Jews always want their children to grow up to marry who? Other Jews, because it's important to preserve their culture, their history, and their religion. Like to them, this is really important. All right. So here's the thing: late 1800s, the Jews are hanging around in Europe, but there's some problems. And one of the big problems is that they are developing in Europe, but there's some bad stereotypes that come out about the Jews. Okay. And one of the stereotypes, because they had managed to prosper throughout the time period, there was a stereotype developed that they were in charge of all the money, that they secretly were hoarding wealth. All right. Jews had these stereotypes that they were secretly hoarding the wealth and that they were controlling everything. Do you know how we like conspiracy theories? Well, Europeans had conspiracy theories about the Jews. One of them was they're hoarding all the wealth. Now, another major problem that Europeans had with the Jews dealt with religion. What's the big religion of Europe? It's not a trick question. What is it? What'd you say, Ramiro? No, say it, throw it out there. The Catholic Church or Christianity in general. Okay, Protestants had made some headway, but it's Christianity. Okay, Christians, what problem or what did they start saying about Jews that made the Jews seem like not likable people? It's not that they don't believe in Jesus. It's something worse. They hold Jews accountable for killing Jesus. Okay, because if you read the Old Testament and New Testament history, it's the Jews who were after Jesus because he was causing various issues. And so they're like, hey, these people are hoarding all the wealth. Not only do they not believe in Jesus, but they killed Jesus. All right. So they got these groups of people who are a minority, and they're like, hey, they killed Jesus. They're hoarding all the money. There are a lot of other strange stereotypes that went around as well, including that they were the inferior race of Europe. There was some bad literature written at the time that would have the theory that there were different races of people and that certain races were better than others. And guess who they traditionally put at the bottom? Jews. Okay? Several sociologists at the time had come out with books, and we'll talk about these specifically later on. And by the way, the Nazis latched onto these too. And they're like, see, these books say it. The Jews are at the bottom of the racial ladder. All right. Now, if you're the Jews and you're living in Europe, are you really overly thrilled about living there? Probably not, because everybody seems to not like you or believes bad stereotypes. And if you've ever had a rumor started about you, you understand that sentiment. Okay? So, late 1800s, something changes. Jews start something called the Zionist movement. Ooh, that sounds interesting. All right. If you're familiar with the Old Testament, does anybody know what Zion was? It's the city of God. Okay. Now, Jews said, hey, we're not really liked in Egypt, or excuse me, we're not really liked here in Europe. And you know what? God did promise us the Holy Land back in Israel. So it's the movement to return to ancient Israel, the Holy Land. Oh. So a guy by the name of Theodor Herzl starts proposing that they start moving back to the Holy Land. Okay. You can see the diaspora. We're not worried about that right now. But Theodor Herzl, he starts advocating that Jews pack up their stuff and go back to ancient Israel. He says, we're not very well liked in Europe. We have the financial means and resources in a lot of ways. And so let's go to our traditional homeland. Sounds great, right? What's the problem with that? Toby? All right. The problem is that they want to go back to their homeland, but there's already people living there. Okay. Let me go back to a map here for a hot second. Right. If you go back and take a look at this map here, the Jews got kicked out of their homeland by the Romans and nearly wiped out in 70 AD. And now we're talking about the 1890s. So for the last 1800 years, that land had been occupied. Who moved in there? Not Muslims, Arabs, people of the Arabian Peninsula. People on this peninsula started moving there. Specifically, the people at the time, the Arabs, didn't call that land Israel anymore. They called it Palestine. All right? They started calling it Palestine. And that's what it had been known as. in the years since then. And so the Jews are coming back, and how do you think these Palestinian Arabs look at Jews who are coming back? How do we view when people come to our country and they don't do it legally? We don't like it. What do a lot of people suggest we do on the southern border? Well, yeah, we deport them or build a wall, something to do it. The Palestinians look at this as an illegal immigration problem, right? And they felt bad originally, early on. Like some of the Palestinians were like, "Oh, we'll let some of the Jews come in," but then they kept coming in by large numbers, right? And remember, what did Jews believe about this area? God promised it to them. Okay? So they believe it belongs to them and not the Palestinians. They're like, hey, we called dibs. God gave it to us like thousands of years ago. And the Palestinians are like, we're not cool with that. Right? What you're going to have here is a conflict over this piece of land that has been going on for over 130 years. Right? And it's still going on today. The Jews who live there believe that it's Israel. The Palestinian Arabs are like, hey, this is our land. There's no way that we're giving it up. You just can't come back and claim it. Because the Palestinians are like, hey, God didn't tell us about somebody living here. You guys shouldn't have gotten wiped out in 70 AD. Right? And so you see that conflict is going to develop over this particular land. Now, this is going to play a huge role, especially after our next chapter, after World War I. You're going to find out that it becomes more than just an immigration problem. All right. And it's going to be white people that mess everything up because, that's what we're good at. All right. So you got Palestine, this area that they're fighting over, and the Jews are like, hey, we're just trying to go to our traditional homeland. And the Palestinians are like, we've been here for 1,800 years. You can't just come back and claim it. That's not how this works. It's kind of like, you're like, hey, save my seat. Right? Here's another example. I've never heard of this before in my life. The only time I ever thought I was going to get angry enough to really want to fight somebody, a couple years ago, I was at a Marshall game and it was jam packed. And there was a parking place, and I was pulling into it, and a guy runs out and stands in the parking place and said, I'm saving this for my friend. And I was like, no, you're not. I was like, I'm parking here. And one of my buddies was with me, and he's like, it's not worth it. Please, let's just go. And I'm like, yes, it is. I'm like, I can run this guy over. I'm like, you can't save a parking place. Who does that? Anyways, you get the idea. All right. So that's where we end this little chapter right here. And